Hello and happy Earth Day. We are back with two bonus artworks from our Global Contemporary unit in celebration of nature today. So we have 234 Earth's Creation by Emily Kame Kngwarreye. It's kind of hard to say. 1994 synthetic polymer paint on canvas, and 239 The Crossing by Viola, 1996 video sound installation. So our first work is Earth's Creation, and just some kind of context on the artist. She was born in 1910, and she is Australian and an Aboriginal Australian, so that means that she is native to Australia. In our Pacific unit, we actually have no artworks from Australia, which I think is really interesting. So this is our official Australian artwork from our 250. She was born into a community in Australia that was forcibly occupied by European pastoral settlers. So that meant that they were sheep shepherds and farmers, pastoral. And she worked on a pastoral property, and she tended to sheep and cattle while she was growing up. And then in 1976, Aboriginal land rights were granted legally, and she was finally able to live independently. So she was no longer kind of required to live on the land that used to be her people's and work for someone else. So they got their land rights back finally. She is a self-taught artist who trained in ceremonial paintings of dreamings, which is a very traditional Australian Aboriginal painting form, and she also painted others with ritual body paint, and this very much influenced her painting style, which is influenced by the natural world like we see in this painting here. So in the 1970s, she started using batik method, which is this kind of wax-resisted dyeing method that we see often in Indonesia, and it's kind of integrated into African textiles. Anyway, and she was using this method purely for artistic purposes and not for ceremony anymore. And her early artworks were abstract, and they featured a lot of earth tones and repeated dots, which is something that we see in these kind of dreamings, that Aboriginal art form. And we see that kind of carried into her work here. And she did not become famous until she was in her 80s, so 80 years old, after an exhibition of Aboriginal artworks in Sydney, Australia. And then she died in 1996. So her fame was short-lived, but she became one of the most, if not the most famous Australian artist to this day. So more about Aboriginal culture. So the Aboriginals of Australia are very connected to the landscape, especially the earth and the soil of Australia, which the Australian continent has been inhabited by humans for about 40,000 years, which is a really long time. And dreamings are a ritual that explains the origin of the universe and workings of nature and humanity through stories, art, ceremony, and songs. So she was originally a dreamings painter, so she would create art that kind of connected to nature and the origins of her people. Now, Earth's Creation itself here is a very, very large artwork. I don't have sizes of it. It's in one of the videos that I'm going to show you. But like looking at it initially, we know that it's made of mostly like cool colors, which kind of evokes the sense of maybe leaves or water or just kind of natural objects. This painting in particular, Earth's Creation, is a reference to what is called green time in Australia. So we know that most of Australia is a big old desert, right? And green time is the period after heavy rain when the vegetation in the desert starts to become really lush and everything starts to bloom. So we have this kind of visual representation of almost like what we would call springtime, right? After we have all of these kind of, you know, the like phrase like April showers brings May flowers, right? So we have a lot of rain and then all of this vegetation starts to bloom after this kind of desert and drought. So let's watch parts of these videos here. We're going to start with this one because we see Emily herself kind of working.
If any Australian artist should be seen as an international great, it's Emily, and few people would dispute that. It's not Monet. It's not simply give out some bucks, put up a few masterpieces. The whole world knows about it.
We're doing something different. An artist who doesn't have a brand here in Japan.
Okay, so throughout this video we saw more kind of like traditional Aboriginal dream paintings, and they're these kind of like dot paintings almost, and they typically look like a lot of animals and stuff. And then we saw Emily, where is it? Oh, here's the desert. Sorry, this is horrible. You didn't sign up for this. Must have been at the beginning of the video, dang it. We saw Emily kind of working on a painting. She would often put them on the floor, which is very reminiscent of like Jackson Pollock and his large scale, or Helen Frankenthaler, which I love. Let's watch this one. He's gonna spit a lot of facts at us, but stay focused.
Kame Kngwarreye is Australia's highest ranking Aboriginal artist according to the Australian Indigenous Art Market Index. She began painting in 1989 at 79 years of age, and over the following 7 years created more than 4,000 individual paintings. In May 2007, Lawson Menzies sold Earth's Creation 1995 for $1,056,000 against a pre-sale estimate of $500,000 to $700,000. It was the first time an Australian Aboriginal artwork had exceeded $1 million at public sale, and still stands as the highest price ever paid for the work of an Australian female artist. The work, created in 4 panels measuring a total of 6.32 by 2.75 metres, was created during 1995 in a bush workshop coordinated by her nephew Fred Torres. The wildly colourful work was produced by double dipping brushes into pots of layered paint, thereby creating floral impressions with alternately coloured variegated outlines. Despite her advanced age, Emily's physicality was evident. Painting with a brush in each hand, she pounded them down onto the canvas, spreading the bristles and leaving the coagulating paint around the neck of the brush to create depth and form. Along with her Anmudjera clanswomen from Utopia, Emily participated in the yearly ceremonial activity at the onset of the summer rainy season. Paintings like this, produced in summer, were usually more colourful and highly charged with energy than those done in the dry season, due to the keyed-up expectation of rain, the excitement of its arrival, and the explosive flowering of the desert.
Okay, so go Emily. That painting sold for $1 million at an auction in 2007, which is the highest price for a female artist's work in Australia. Her work has been compared to Monet's water lilies, kind of like impressionist artworks with how painterly it is. Here we have a picture of her sitting on the ground painting with her colors. So the way that she would actually paint this is she would have a paintbrush and she would dip her paintbrush in one color and then in another color, so that way when she pressed it down to the canvas there would be kind of two dots in one. Let me see if we can find. Oh, I mean, this is a giant painting. It's a little bit hard to tell. You can tell a little bit down here with the blue and white kind of overlapping dots. So that's how she would paint. And then another quick sidebar that has nothing to do with anything with this artwork. I guess it does. But I just think it's interesting how in this video of that man talking about this artist's work, he refers to her by her first name, which I feel like is very common amongst female artists, is that they are referred to as, referred to by their first name, like Frida for Frida Kahlo or Georgia for Georgia O'Keeffe. But when we talk about male artists, we more often than not use their last names, like Da Vinci or Van Gogh, or I guess Michelangelo is a first name. But there's something just slightly more professional about using a last name, so I would encourage you to use last names when you talk about female artists also. Okay, on to our next artwork. So this one is a little bit different. This is The Crossing by Bill Viola, 1996 video and sound installation. So this is probably an artwork that would surprise or confuse a lot of us if we encountered it in real life, which is why I wanted to include it. So video and sound. We know from just art historically, we had the invention of the camera in the late 19th or early 20th century. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. And then eventually we got the kind of first forms of video, not video photography, motion pictures with our Edward Muybridge Horse in Motion, which is really great. So the ability to take lots of photos in rapid succession, so that way we could have videos. Bill Viola uses a really fast high-speed camera that registers 300 frames per second. So 300 of these per 1 second. I think in typical animation, Paige would probably know this better than I, but I think it's like 36 frames per second, I think. So it's very fast. So with the kind of increased speed and amount of frames per second, we have a lot more detail and things that we cannot see with our human eye, right? We didn't know that horses, when they were running, when all four of their feet were off the ground, they were kind of under themselves rather than all out in front. So significantly slows down everything. I don't know if you've ever watched like Planet Earth or something like that. Those are just like mesmerizing videos. So anyway, he takes these videos and then reduces the speed of the playback to this like extremely slow motion video that invites the viewer to kind of meditate and contemplate while they're watching the videos. So I have a clip of the videos here, and just some kind of like context of what this would look like in a gallery when you walk in. It's in this video, and I don't want to scrub and annoy you and try and find it, but basically you would walk into a completely dark gallery and there would be a screen with the water video on one side and then the fire video on the other side. And they were 16 feet tall. Oh, actually, it was 16 feet tall and it was two-sided. So this would be like on one side and this would be on the other side. So you couldn't watch both of them at once. 2 separate videos, but only 1 audio track. So depending on which one you were looking at, you either interpreted the sounds as water flowing or fire burning, which I think is really interesting that our brain can be tricked into thinking that just one soundtrack is either of those 2 very different things. Okay, so let's watch this. I encourage you just to watch this. Don't scroll through anything or pet your cat or get up and get a snack. Just watch. Okay, so that was the crossing, and throughout that whole video, we just slowly see these 2 figures, and remember, we would only see one of them at once, but they slowly become completely engulfed by either water or fire, 2 natural occurrences. So Bill Viola, and I'll show you this video after I talk about his ideas, but Bill Viola is an artist who he personally practices Zen Buddhism, which we know that we have talked about before with Ryo and G in our rock garden here. And he has studied many, many different religions and their traditions and kind of the themes that are universal throughout these different religions. And we see religious narratives often using fire and water. Like if we think about our Shiva, the destroyer, preserver, I don't know why I'm blanking on that. He dances in this ring of fire as he destroys the universe so that way it can be renewed, right? This kind of destruction and then renewal. We see that same theme here with Noah from the Sistine Chapel ceiling, God coming and flooding the earth so that way all of the sinful people can be wiped out and they can start again with humanity. We also see kind of the idea of just religious destruction in our Last Judgment scenes here with Michelangelo's in the Sistine Chapel. This one is the Giotto from the Scriveni Chapel, and this is our tympanum from Santa Fe. So a lot of religious narratives have these kind of elemental forces of fire and water that often symbolize change, redemption, transformation, renewal, which are all common themes amongst Bill Viola's artworks. So in his artwork, The Crossing, he's taking these kind of natural things and he's undoing our typical creation story, right? If we think about where humans come from and the different ways that religion has stories of the creation of man, he's reversing that process, right? He's kind of destroying man through fire and water here. And it just kind of stands for the different themes and narratives that we have throughout religious narratives of the destruction of humanity. So I'm going to leave you with this video of Bill Viola kind of talking about his process of brainstorming as an artist, which I just thought was really interesting. And there's also a clip in here of people kind of seeing these in the gallery setting. Maybe.
One day, this thought popped into my mind of man on fire. I mean, I even wrote it in my notebook like that. It was like a one-liner. And I just wrote it down, put it away. And then some months later, I don't know when, it popped up again. You know, image of a man. And it was a little further developed. And then maybe 6 to 9 months later, in another notebook, there was another one. And I realized that this little kernel of a thought was evolving in my life while I was just going on and doing everything else. And then all of a sudden it was like water pouring on this guy, not just fire. Over the course of several years, this piece formed itself in the unconscious mode. And then the final thing was, I guess what happens for me is it's like this nagging thing, like someone tugging on your shirt sleeve very gently at first. And then at the end, they're like trying to grab you and say, make me, you know? And then I knew I really had to make it. So here's a bunch of quotes, one of which here is one of my favorites from St. John of the Cross. Human science is not capable of understanding it, nor experience of describing it. Only one who has passed through it will know what it means, though there will be no words for it. So the wordless knowledge. So the end of this 4-day retreat thing, finally, all of that ends up in lists and lists and lists and more lists, and then occasionally new ones, and then it ends up in this, which is, I don't know, I haven't counted these. I think there's something on the order of like 50 pieces here. I will make some of these, I'm sure. You know, I don't know how many. It's not important. But this is a whole journey that I've kind of sketched out, I guess, without actually making it yet.
Okay, that's it. Happy Earth Day, guys. Bye.